At my sister's engagement dinner, her fiancé looked at my thrift store dress and laughed, saying I'd probably never seen a real investment portfolio in my life. Everyone at the table, my parents, my sister, even my boyfriend, stayed silent while he went on about his impressive stock picks. But when he started bragging about his net worth, I pulled out my phone and opened my brokerage app. The look on his face when he saw those 7 figures? That's when I finally took my power back. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Marian Bridgers, and I'm 33 years old. For most of my adult life, I've been the family disappointment. Not because I've failed at anything, but because I've succeeded quietly, in ways my family couldn't brag about at their country club brunches. I live in a modest 1-bedroom apartment with second-hand furniture and a dented Honda Civic. I wear clothes from thrift stores and clearance racks, not because I have to, but because I choose to. Because I learned a long time ago that real wealth isn't about looking rich. It's about being free. I work as a junior librarian at the Hayesworth Public Library. It's a quiet job that pays $38,000 a year, not impressive by anyone's standards, especially not my family's. But it's also a job that gives me time. Time to read, time to think, and most importantly, time to research. See, what my family doesn't know, what nobody knows except my financial advisor, is that I've been building an investment portfolio since I was 23 years old. It started small. Really small. I'd saved $5,000 from working 2 jobs through college, and instead of spending it on a nice apartment or a better car like everyone expected, I opened a brokerage account. I spent 6 months researching before making my first investment. I read everything I could get my hands on, books about value investing, market analysis, compound interest, dividend growth strategies. I studied Warren Buffett's annual letters like they were scripture. I learned to read financial statements, to identify undervalued companies, to think long-term when everyone else was chasing quick gains. My first investment was $2,000 in a pharmaceutical company everyone had written off after a failed drug trial. But I'd read their pipeline reports. I knew they had 3 other promising candidates in development. 18 months later, one of those drugs got FDA approval. My $2,000 turned into $8,400. I was hooked. But I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my younger sister Grace, not even my boyfriend Doug. Because I'd learned early that my family only respected success that looked a certain way. Success that came with impressive job titles and designer labels and the right kind of social circle. My sister Grace is 28 and everything I'm not in my parents' eyes. She's a marketing coordinator at a boutique firm downtown, a job that sounds more impressive than it pays, but nobody asks about the salary. She lives in a trendy loft in the Arts District, wears designer clothes she can't actually afford, and dates men who drive luxury cars and summer in the Hamptons. Grace is magnetic, confident, beautiful in that effortless way that makes people assume she must have her life together. She's the daughter my parents introduce first at every gathering, the one whose accomplishments get highlighted in holiday cards, the one whose Instagram feed looks like a lifestyle magazine. I'm the one they mention second, if they mention me at all. And this is Marian, our practical one. She works at the library. Practical. That word has followed me my entire life. It's code for boring, unambitious, settled for less. My mother, Greta Bridgers, uses it the way other people use words like unfortunate or disappointing, with a tight smile that doesn't reach her eyes. My father, Conrad Bridgers, is a semi-retired commercial real estate broker who measures people's worth by their zip code and the brand of watch they wear. He spent my entire life looking slightly past me, like I'm furniture he stopped noticing because it's been there too long and never changes. Every Sunday, we have family dinner at my parents' house, a sprawling colonial in the wealthiest suburb of our city. The kind of house with a circular driveway and professionally maintained landscaping and rooms that exist just to impress visitors who never come. These dinners are performances. My mother serves them on heirloom china. The wine comes from my father's collection. The conversation revolves around achievements and acquisitions and who's doing what impressive thing in their impressive life. I usually sit quietly at these dinners, eating my mother's catered meals, listening to Grace talk about her latest boyfriend or her work projects or the vacation she's planning to someplace expensive. I've learned to make myself small in these spaces, to take up as little room as possible, to avoid drawing attention to the fact that I don't measure up. But here's what none of them know: while they were performing, I was building. While Grace was spending money she didn't have to look successful, I was investing every spare dollar. While my parents were judging me for my modest lifestyle, I was watching my portfolio grow. Almost 10 years of disciplined investing, of living below my means, of saying no to expensive dinners and designer bags and impressive apartments. 10 years of compound interest working in my favor while everyone else spent themselves into debt trying to look wealthy. My portfolio hit 7 figures last year. $1.3 million, to be exact. And not a single person in my family had any idea. Until Grace's engagement dinner, when her fiancé made the mistake of calling me poor. Grace called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was shelving returns in the biography section. Her voice had that high-pitched excitement she got when she wanted everyone to know something amazing was happening in her life. Marion. Oh my God, I have the most incredible news. I wedged my phone between my shoulder and ear, continuing to slide books onto shelves. What's up? Jeremiah proposed. We're engaged. I stopped mid-reach. Jeremiah? The guy you've been dating for, 4 months? 5 months, she corrected, like that extra month made all the difference. And I know it seems fast, but Marion, he's different. He's not like the other guys I've dated. He's successful, ambitious, established. He works in wealth management at Randall & Associates. Do you know how prestigious that firm is? I didn't, but I could tell she was about to explain. He manages portfolios for high-net-worth clients. We're talking millionaires, Marion. People with serious money. And he's only 34. His clients trust him with their entire financial futures. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, though I couldn't explain why. That's great, Grace. Congratulations. Mom and Dad are over the moon. Dad already invited him to play golf at the club next weekend. And Mom, oh my God, Mom literally cried when she saw the ring. It's 2 carats, Marion. 2 carats. Jeremiah said he wanted me to have something that matched my value. I wanted to ask if he'd appraised her like a diamond too, but I bit my tongue. Sounds like he's made quite an impression. He really has. And I want you to meet him properly. We're doing an engagement dinner at Mom and Dad's this Sunday. The whole family. Jeremiah's going to be there, obviously. You're coming, right? You can bring Doug. Doug Hemmings, my boyfriend of 2 years. A high school biology teacher who spent his weekends coaching the school's science Olympiad team and his evenings grading lab reports. He was kind, genuine, and quietly brilliant in a way that didn't photograph well or sound impressive at cocktail parties. Yeah, we'll be there, I said. Perfect. I can't wait for you to meet him. Jeremiah's he's everything I've been looking for, you know? Smart, confident, successful. And he treats me like a queen. Last weekend he took me to this restaurant where we had to make reservations 3 months in advance. 3 months, Marion. After we hung up, I stood in the quiet aisle of the library, surrounded by other people's life stories bound in cloth and paper, and felt an inexplicable sense of dread. Over the next few days, Grace texted me constantly with updates. Photos of the ring from different angles. Screenshots of the restaurant where they'd had their first date. A picture of Jeremiah's BMW with the caption, "My fiancé has excellent taste in everything." I looked him up online. Jeremiah Randall's LinkedIn showed the usual, professional headshot with a confident smile, MBA from a decent school, current role as senior wealth advisor. His Instagram was all charity galas and golf courses. Everything designed to broadcast success. My mother called the next day. Marion, darling, about Sunday's dinner. I waited. There was always a caveat with my mother's calls. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Grace wants this to be special. It's her engagement celebration, after all. So perhaps, well, do you have something nice to wear? Something a bit more formal than what you usually choose? Translation: don't embarrass us in front of Grace's impressive new fiancé. I'll find something appropriate, I said. Wonderful. And Marion? Jeremiah is very successful. Very accomplished. Grace is just glowing around him. Your father and I are so pleased she's found someone of his caliber. Of his caliber. As if people could be ranked like investments, blue chip, mid-cap, penny stock. I'm happy for her, I said, and meant it. I was happy for Grace. I wanted her to be loved, to be valued, to find partnership and joy. But I'd also learned to recognize certain patterns in my sister's relationships. She'd always been drawn to men who looked successful, who could elevate her social status, who gave her something to show off. And those men, in turn, were often drawn to Grace's beauty and charm, the surface-level appeal that photographed well and impressed their colleagues. I wondered if Jeremiah Randall was different, or if he was just another variation of the same pattern. I'd find out Sunday. Doug picked me up Sunday evening in his 10-year-old Subaru. He was wearing his nicest button-down shirt, the blue one I'd bought him last Christmas, and khakis he'd ironed himself. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd shaved carefully, a small nick on his jaw where he'd been too meticulous. You look nice, I said, getting in. So do you. He glanced at my dress, a simple navy shift I'd found at a consignment shop for $18. It was clean, appropriate, unremarkable. Exactly what I intended. As we drove toward my parents' house, Doug reached over and squeezed my hand. You okay? You seem tense. Just the usual Sunday dinner nerves, I said. But it was more than that. Something about this dinner felt different. Like standing at the edge of something I couldn't quite see yet, knowing the ground was about to shift beneath my feet. I just didn't know how much. We pulled into my parents' circular driveway at exactly 6 o'clock. Every window glowed with warm light. The front door wreath was perfectly centered. Even the landscaping looked freshly manicured. My mother opened the door before we could knock, wearing her pearl necklace. The real ones, not the everyday pearls. That told me everything I needed to know about how important this dinner was to her. Marion. Doug. Right on time. She kissed my cheek while her eyes did a rapid scan of my outfit. I watched her smile tighten microscopically when she registered the familiar navy dress. Come in, come in. Grace and Jeremiah are already here. The dining room table was set with crystal glasses and silverware arranged with military precision. Cloth napkins, burgundy, because it was October, folded into some complicated shape. My mother ushered us toward the living room, where I could hear conversation and laughter. The kind of easy, comfortable laughter that came from people who felt they belonged. Grace practically levitated off the cream-colored sofa when she saw us. Marion. You're here. She looked stunning, because of course she did. A designer dress I recognized from her Instagram, something emerald green that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her engagement ring caught every available light source, sparkling like it had its own agenda. And beside her sat Jeremiah Randall. He was exactly what his photos promised. Tall, well-built in that way that suggested a personal trainer and regular gym sessions. His dark hair was styled with just enough product to look intentional. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him so perfectly it could only be custom-tailored, paired with a watch I recognized as a Rolex Submariner. That particular model retailed for about $15,000. He stood when we entered, smooth, practiced, like he'd been trained in executive presence seminars. His smile was white and straight, probably the result of expensive orthodontia and regular whitening treatments. You must be Marion, he said, extending his hand. I've heard so much about you. His handshake was firm, confident, calculated. Not too strong, not too weak. The kind they teach in business school networking classes. Nice to meet you, I said, extracting my hand. And you're Doug? Jeremiah turned to my boyfriend, and I watched his eyes flick briefly, so briefly most people wouldn't notice, to Doug's off-the-rack blazer, his department store watch, his scuffed dress shoes. That's me, Doug said, shaking hands. Grace says you're in wealth management? Senior advisor at Randall & Associates, Jeremiah confirmed, his tone friendly but with an undercurrent of pride. We specialize in high net worth portfolio optimization. It's challenging work, but incredibly rewarding when you can help clients maximize their financial potential. My father appeared from the kitchen, scotch already in hand. Conrad Bridgers in his natural habitat, assessing, measuring, calculating worth. Jeremiah. He crossed the room with more warmth than I'd seen him show anyone in years. We were just discussing the market volatility. Your perspective on the Fed's rate decisions was fascinating. Well, you know how it is, sir, Jeremiah said, settling back into the sofa with ease. The key is understanding that short-term fluctuations are just noise. Real wealth building is about strategic positioning and patience. My father nodded like Jeremiah had just shared the secret of the universe. We moved to the dining room, and I watched the seating arrangement reveal itself. My parents at the heads of the table. Grace and Jeremiah on one side, positioned like royalty. Doug and I were placed across from them, but farther down, close enough to participate, far enough to remember our place. Dinner began with my mother's signature mushroom soup, served in bowls that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The conversation flowed easily around Jeremiah, who held court like a keynote speaker. The portfolio strategies we implement at Randall & Associates are really cutting edge, he was saying, swirling his wine. Most people don't understand the complexity of true wealth management. It's not just about picking stocks. It's about tax optimization, estate planning, risk mitigation across multiple asset classes. My father leaned forward, fascinated. That's exactly right. Too many people treat investing like gambling instead of approaching it strategically. Grace beamed beside Jeremiah, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She was glowing in that way people do when they think they've won something everyone else wanted. My mother couldn't stop smiling. This was exactly what she'd dreamed of for Grace, a man who could hold his own in conversations about money and markets, who wore the right watch and had the right credentials. Doug tried to engage, asking Jeremiah about his work, but I could see him already shrinking. His shoulders curved slightly inward. His voice got quieter. He was becoming smaller in this space, the way I always did. I pushed salmon around my plate and felt the familiar weight of invisibility settling over me. This was my role in the family narrative, the practical daughter with her practical job and her practical boyfriend, sitting quietly while the impressive people discussed impressive things. But then Jeremiah's attention shifted. And I felt the temperature in the room change. So, Marion, he said, his tone still friendly but with something sharper underneath. Something assessing. Grace mentioned you work at the library? The way he said, library, made it sound like I volunteered at a petting zoo. I'm a junior librarian at Haysworth Public Library, I said, keeping my voice even. That's nice, Jeremiah nodded slowly, in that way people do when they're trying to find something polite to say about a job they consider beneath them. Must be, peaceful work. Quiet. Grace giggled. Marion's always loved books. She's perfectly content in her little world. Her little world. Like I was a child playing in a sandbox while the adults discussed real things. The condescension started small, the way these things always do. Little comments wrapped in smiles, insults disguised as observations. A librarian, Jeremiah repeated, as if testing the word in his mouth. That's such a stable career choice. Good benefits, I imagine. Pension plan? It's a civil service position, I said. So yes, decent benefits. See, that's smart, he said, gesturing with his fork. Not everyone needs to chase high earnings. Some people value security over growth potential, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different mindset. My mother nodded approvingly, like he'd made an excellent point. Now, Doug, he said, turning his attention to my boyfriend. Grace mentioned you're a teacher. That's admirable work. Really admirable. Teachers are so undervalued in our society. Admirable. The word people use when they mean important but pointless. High school biology, Doug said, his voice quieter than usual. I also coached the science Olympiad team. That's fantastic, Jeremiah said with rehearsed enthusiasm. You're shaping young minds. Can't put a price on that, right? Even though, unfortunately, society kind of does put a price on it, and it's not nearly what it should be. He chuckled at his own observation. My father joined in with a polite laugh. Have you ever thought about transitioning into the private sector? Jeremiah continued. A lot of teachers I've met have incredible skill sets: organization, communication, leadership. Those translate really well to corporate training positions. Much better compensation, too. I know people at educational consulting firms. They pay actual market rates, not public school salaries. The implication was clear: you're wasting your potential on a job that doesn't pay enough. Doug forced a smile. I appreciate the thought. But I actually love classroom teaching. Of course, Jeremiah said, in a tone that suggested he didn't understand that at all. It's just that in my line of work, I see how much money matters. How it creates options, freedom, security. It's hard to build a real future on a teacher's salary, you know? Especially if you're thinking about marriage, kids, homeownership. The math just doesn't work. Grace was watching this exchange with a small smile, like she was proud of how thoughtful her fiancé was being. My mother looked sympathetic, in that way that felt more like pity. The main course arrived, my mother's famous herb-crusted rack of lamb, plated with precision. The conversation continued its slow dissection of my life and Doug's choices. Marion, that's an interesting dress, Jeremiah said during a lull. Very classic. Timeless style. Classic. Timeless. Code words for cheap and outdated. Thank you, I said flatly. I love that you're not caught up in fashion trends, he continued. Grace is always buying new things, keeping up with what's current. But there's something to be said for practicality. Especially on a limited budget. There was that word again. Practical. My family's favorite label for me. Marion's always been more minimalist, Grace offered, like she was defending a quirky relative. She doesn't need material things to be happy. Doesn't need. As if my choices were about necessity rather than preference. That's actually a good mindset, Jeremiah said. Because when you're in a lower income bracket, it's important to live within your means. I see so many people trying to keep up appearances they can't afford. Credit card debt, car loans they can't handle. At least Marion is being realistic about her financial position. My father nodded thoughtfully, as if Jeremiah had just shared profound wisdom. I felt Doug tense beside me. His knee pressed harder against mine under the table. The thing about wealth, Jeremiah continued, clearly enjoying his role as financial sage, is that it's not just about making money. It's about understanding how money works. Investment strategies, compound growth, asset allocation. Most people, no offense, just don't have the financial literacy to build real wealth. They think if they save a little each month, they're doing well. But without understanding market dynamics and portfolio optimization, you're basically treading water. He took a sip of wine, completely unaware that he was explaining my own investment philosophy back to me like I'd never heard of it before. Take Grace and me, he said, reaching over to squeeze my sister's hand. We're building our future strategically. I manage our investments personally. We're talking diversified portfolio, tax-advantaged accounts, real estate investment trusts. By the time we're 40, we'll have generational wealth. That's the difference between understanding money and just earning a paycheck. Grace gazed at him like he'd just invented compound interest. My mother sighed contentedly. It's so wonderful to see young people being financially smart. I pushed lamb around my plate and felt something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. Each comment was a small cut, but they were adding up. Death by 1,000 condescensions. And we hadn't even gotten to dessert yet. Dessert arrived on my mother's finest china, individual servings of crème brûlée arranged with precision. Jeremiah leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed, radiating the confidence of someone who'd spent the entire evening proving he was the most impressive person in the room. He cracked the caramelized sugar with his spoon, the sound sharp in the momentary quiet. "You know what I appreciate most about this family," he said, looking around the table. "You all understand the value of success. Of building something meaningful. Of not settling for mediocrity." My father raised his glass slightly in agreement. "That's why Grace and I work so well together," Jeremiah continued. "We both want more out of life. We're ambitious. We understand that comfort comes from calculated risks and smart decisions, not from playing it safe." He glanced at me, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite cruel, but sharper. Like he was about to make a point he'd been building toward all evening. "Marion, can I ask you something? And I hope this doesn't come across as rude, because I'm genuinely curious." I set down my spoon. "Sure. Have you ever thought about what you're going to do long-term? I mean, the library's salary is what, $38,000? Maybe $40,000 with your experience?" "Something like that," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "And Doug's probably in a similar range, maybe a bit higher with coaching stipends?" He didn't wait for confirmation. "So combined, you're looking at maybe $80,000 household income. In this city, with cost of living, that's basically paycheck to paycheck territory. Have you thought about retirement? About building any kind of financial security?" The table had gone quiet. Everyone was watching this exchange like it was a tennis match. "I've thought about it," I said. "Because here's the thing," Jeremiah continued, taking on that educational tone people use when they think they're helping. "Even if you max out your 401k, you're looking at maybe $500,000 by retirement. Sounds like a lot, but with inflation and healthcare? You'll be struggling." He shook his head sympathetically. "It's just the reality of choosing careers that prioritize personal satisfaction over financial growth. There's nothing wrong with that choice. Some people aren't wired for the stress of high-earning professions. But you have to accept the trade-offs." Doug's hand squeezed mine so hard it almost hurt. "I mean, have you ever even seen a real investment portfolio?" Jeremiah asked, and there was something in his voice now, not quite mockery, but close. "Not like a basic 401k, but an actual diversified portfolio? Stocks, bonds, REITs, international exposure, alternative investments?" The question hung in the air. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for me to admit that no, I hadn't. That I was exactly as financially unsophisticated as he assumed. That my world was as small as they'd always believed. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a clean break, like a bone finally giving way under pressure it was never meant to bear. I opened my mouth to respond, though I wasn't sure what I was going to say, when Doug leaned close and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Marion, please. Don't make a scene." 5 words. Don't make a scene. I turned to look at him. My boyfriend of 2 years. The man who'd told me he loved me, who'd promised to support me, who was supposed to be on my side. And he was asking me to stay quiet. To let this continue. To keep being small so everyone else could stay comfortable. His eyes were pleading. Apologetic, even. But also firm. This was a family dinner at my parents' house. Jeremiah was Grace's fiancé. Making waves would be awkward for everyone. Better to just smile, nod, get through it. Like we always did. I felt every Sunday dinner I'd ever endured crash over me at once. Every time I'd stayed quiet while my family dismissed me. Every time I'd made myself smaller to fit into their comfortable narrative about who I was supposed to be. The practical daughter. The one who settled. The one who would never amount to anything impressive. I'd spent 10 years building something real while they performed their expensive charade. I'd sacrificed, strategized, studied, invested. I'd built wealth they couldn't imagine while they judged me for my thrift store dresses and modest apartment. And now Doug, who was supposed to know me, to see me, was asking me to stay invisible. To protect their comfort at the cost of my dignity. Something inside me shifted. A switch flipping after years of being stuck in the off position. Not anger, exactly. Something colder. Clearer. I pulled my hand away from Doug's. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence that had settled over the table. I have seen a real investment portfolio. Jeremiah blinked, surprised I was speaking. Oh. Did you help someone at the library with financial research or something? No, I said, reaching for my phone. I'm looking at mine right now. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. I unlocked my phone slowly, deliberately. My hands were steadier than they'd been in years. Like I'd been preparing for this moment my entire life without knowing it. You know what, Jeremiah? I said, my voice calm and clear. You've spent the entire evening explaining wealth management to me like I'm a child who's never heard of compound interest. Making assumptions about my financial literacy. My income. My future. My understanding of how money works. I opened my brokerage app. So let me show you something. Jeremiah's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of confusion mixed with condescension, like a teacher watching a student volunteer the wrong answer. Marion, I don't think you understand what I mean by a real portfolio. Let me guess, I interrupted, setting my phone face down on the table for a moment. You're about to explain the difference between a basic retirement account and actual wealth management. How real portfolios require substantial capital to properly diversify. How someone at my income level couldn't possibly have the resources to build anything meaningful. His mouth opened, then closed. That was exactly what he'd been about to say. Before you do that, I continued, my voice still calm, why don't you tell everyone about your own portfolio? You've been talking about wealth building all evening. About your investment strategies. Your financial expertise. Share some specifics with us. Grace beamed at him, eager to hear more about her fiancé's impressive financial acumen. Jeremiah straightened slightly, clearly relieved to be back on familiar ground, talking about himself. Well, as a senior wealth advisor, I practice what I preach. I'm diversified across multiple asset classes, 60% equities, 30% fixed income, 10% alternatives. What's the total value? I asked. He hesitated for just a fraction of a second. I'm sitting at around $340,000 in liquid investments. Plus my 401k, real estate equity, other assets. Total net worth is closer to $500,000. My father nodded, impressed. Grace squeezed Jeremiah's hand proudly. And you manage portfolios for high net worth clients, I said. What's the minimum to work with your firm? We typically don't take clients with less than $2 million in investable assets, he said, pride creeping into his voice. Our services are designed for people who've already achieved significant wealth and need sophisticated management strategies. So you've never personally had $2 million to invest, I said. But you advise people who do. That's how wealth management works, Marion, he said, with that patient tone people use when explaining obvious things. Doctors don't need to have every disease to treat patients. Financial advisors don't need to be billionaires to manage large portfolios. We have the education, the credentials, the expertise. That's what clients pay for. Right, I said. Credentials. Like your MBA from Bridgers University? Exactly. It's a competitive program. Not everyone has the aptitude for high-level financial analysis. And you've been with Randall and Associates for how long? 3 years. Before that, I was at Morrison Financial Group, and before that, Jacoby Investments. He was back in his element now, comfortable listing his resume. I've been in wealth management for almost a decade. That's interesting, I said, picking up my phone again. Because I've been investing for about the same amount of time. Started when I was 23, actually. Just a small amount at first. Jeremiah smiled indulgently. That's great, Marion. Everyone should start somewhere. A Roth IRA, maybe some target date funds? That's a solid foundation for someone at your income level. I started with $5,000, I said, ignoring his condescension. Took me 2 years to save it while working 2 jobs in college. Spent 6 months researching before I made my first investment. Very responsible, he said, in the tone you'd use to praise a child for brushing their teeth. My first position was in a pharmaceutical company everyone had written off. Biochem Solutions. They'd just had a failed drug trial, stock was down 60%, analysts were saying sell. But I'd read their pipeline reports. Knew they had other candidates in development. Jeremiah was still smiling, but something in his eyes suggested he was getting bored with this story. He'd already decided it would be a cute anecdote about a small win that made me feel smart. Turned $2,000 into $8,400 in 18 months, I continued. Not life-changing money, but it taught me something important. That most people react emotionally to market movements. They sell when everyone's panicking and buy when everyone's euphoric. The real opportunities come from doing the opposite. That's a nice beginner's lesson, Jeremiah said. Though I should mention that kind of concentrated position is incredibly risky. Real wealth management is about diversification, not betting big on single stocks. Oh, I learned about diversification, I said. Spent the next 10 years learning everything I could about value investing, technical analysis, market cycles, tax optimization strategies. Read every annual report from Berkshire Hathaway. Studied Peter Lynch, Benjamin Graham, Charlie Munger. My mother was watching me with a strange expression, like she was seeing me for the first time and couldn't quite reconcile this person with the daughter she thought she knew. I built positions across multiple sectors, I continued. Technology, healthcare, consumer goods, financial services. Some dividend growth stocks for passive income. Some growth positions for capital appreciation. REITs for real estate exposure without the overhead of property management. International funds for geographic diversification. Jeremiah's smile was starting to look painted on. That's good, Marion. I'm glad you've taken an interest in personal finance. A lot of people your age don't even think about investing. Even if it's just a few $1,000s, it's better than nothing. A few $1,000s, I repeated softly. Well, realistically, on a librarian's salary, even with disciplined saving, you're probably looking at maybe $20,000 or $30,000 after 10 years? That's still good. That's responsible. But it's not what I'd call a portfolio in the wealth management sense. It's more like savings with growth potential. He said it so confidently. So certain he understood my reality better than I did. Grace was nodding along, clearly agreeing that her big sister had done her best with limited resources. My father was looking at me with something like pity, probably thinking about how I'd spent 10 years building a nest egg that wouldn't even cover a down payment on a decent house. And Doug was staring at his plate, still embarrassed that I'd spoken up at all. I turned my phone screen toward Jeremiah. This is my Fidelity account, I said quietly. One of 3 brokerage accounts I maintain. Jeremiah glanced at the screen, his expression already forming that indulgent smile he'd worn all evening. The smile of someone about to praise a child's crayon drawing. Then his eyes focused on the numbers. The smile froze. That can't be. His voice trailed off. I held the phone steady, letting everyone at the table see if they leaned forward. The screen showed my Fidelity account summary in clear, undeniable numbers. Total account value, $847,392.18. The room went silent. Not polite dinner silence. Nuclear silence. The kind that follows an explosion, when everyone's ears are ringing and reality hasn't caught up yet. That's one account, I said, my voice calm and conversational. Would you like to see the other 2? Jeremiah's tan face had drained of color. He looked like someone had punched him in the stomach and he was still waiting for his lungs to remember how to work. I swiped to my Charles Schwab account without waiting for an answer. Total account value, $312,847.56. And my Vanguard account, I continued, pulling up the third app. Total account value, $183,241.09. My mother made a small sound. Something between a gasp and a whimper. Combined portfolio value as of market close Friday, $1,343,480.83, I said, my tone as casual as if I were reading a grocery list. That's liquid investments. Doesn't include my Roth IRA, which is another $87,000, or the 401k from my previous corporate job before I took the library position, which has about $43,000. Grace's mouth was open. Literally open. Like her jaw had disconnected. My father's Scotch glass trembled in his hand. Doug was staring at me like I'd just revealed I was a secret agent. Jeremiah finally found his voice. There must be some mistake. That's not possible. On your salary. On my salary of $38,000 a year? I interrupted gently. You're right. It wouldn't be possible if I'd only been earning this salary. But I didn't always work at the library. I set my phone down on the table, screen still glowing with those 7-figure numbers. I spent 5 years in corporate HR after college, I explained. Hated every minute of it. Toxic environment, pointless politics, but it paid $62,000 to start and $78,000 by the time I left. I lived like I made $30,000. Drove a used car. Had roommates. Packed my lunch every single day. Invested the difference. Jeremiah was shaking his head slowly, like he could make this untrue through sheer disbelief. Then I quit and took the library job, I continued. Because I'd learned something important. Once you have enough invested, compound growth does most of the work. I didn't need a high salary anymore. I needed time. Time to research companies, track market trends, rebalance my portfolio quarterly. The library job gave me that time. But Grace's voice came out small, confused. You live in that tiny apartment. You shop at thrift stores. You drive that old Honda. Because I choose to, I said, looking at my sister directly. Every dollar I don't spend on impressing people is a dollar that compounds at an average of 8 to 10% annually. That old Honda is paid off. No car payment means I can invest an extra $400 a month. That tiny apartment costs $900 in rent. Which means I can invest another $800 that you're spending on your trendy loft. I turned my attention back to Jeremiah, whose face had gone from pale to flushed red. You said I've probably never seen a real investment portfolio, I continued, my voice still calm, still even. You spent 20 minutes explaining wealth management to me like I was a child. But let me tell you what I see when I look at your portfolio, Jeremiah. He didn't respond. Couldn't respond. $340,000 in liquid investments after a decade in the industry. That's not terrible, but it's not impressive either. You know why? Because you're spending everything you make trying to look successful. That BMW? $800 monthly lease payment. That Rolex? $15,000 that could have been invested. Those dinners at restaurants with 3-month waiting lists. Those add up. My father was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language he'd never heard before. You're a financial advisor who doesn't follow his own advice, I said. You tell your clients to live below their means, but you're leveraged up trying to maintain an image. You talk about diversification, but I'd bet money you're overweight in tech stocks because they've been hot. You lecture people about long-term thinking while you chase short-term gains. Now wait just a minute, Jeremiah started, but I wasn't finished. You asked if I understood what a real portfolio looks like, I said. So let me explain mine. 40% total market index funds. 25% dividend aristocrats, companies that have raised dividends for 25 straight years. 15% international. 10% REITs. 10% carefully researched individual stocks with strong balance sheets and competitive advantages. I picked up my phone again, swiped to another app. I track every position in a spreadsheet. Every dividend payment, every rebalancing trade, every tax implication. I know my cost basis on every single holding. I turned the phone toward him again, showing a detailed spreadsheet with color-coded cells. My returns? 2015 through 2024, averaged 13.7% annually. Beat the S&P 500 by nearly 2 percentage points over a decade. The numbers hung in the air like smoke. So yes, Jeremiah, I said softly. I've seen a real investment portfolio. I built one. While you were leasing luxury cars and buying expensive watches to impress clients, I was compounding wealth. While you were explaining to people like me how money works, I was actually making it work. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to have stopped ticking. Jeremiah's face cycled through colors like a broken traffic light. Red to white to red again. His jaw worked soundlessly, trying to form words that wouldn't come. My mother had gone completely still, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. My father set down his scotch with a heavy thunk. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between awe and shame and complete confusion. Doug looked like he'd been slapped. His mouth hung open, his eyes darting between me and the phone screen. "You're lying," Jeremiah finally managed, his voice hoarse. "That's not real. Those accounts, you manipulated the screenshots or something. This is." "Pull up your phone," I said calmly. "Check Fidelity's website. Account number 4782 to 9341. You'll need my permission to view it, obviously, but the account exists. It's registered to Marion Bridgers at my current address." His hand moved toward his pocket, then stopped. Because checking would make it real. And he desperately needed this not to be real. "I don't understand," Grace whispered. Her voice was small, lost. "Marion, you've always been poor," I supplied gently. "Struggling? The disappointing sister who couldn't get her life together." She flinched. "I know what you all thought," I continued. "What you've always thought. That I settled for a simple life because I couldn't handle anything more challenging. That I work at a library because I'm not ambitious enough for a real career. That I shop at thrift stores because I can't afford anything else." My mother finally found her voice. "But you never said anything. You never told us. All these years, we thought." "You thought exactly what you wanted to think," I interrupted, and for the first time, I let some edge into my voice. "You decided who I was when I was 23 years old and took that HR job instead of something more impressive. You wrote my story for me and never once asked if it was true." "That's not fair," my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I looked at him directly. "When was the last time you asked me about my life? About my goals, my achievements, my plans for the future? When was the last Sunday dinner where anyone at this table asked me a single question about myself that wasn't surface-level small talk?" He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Jeremiah was still staring at the phone screen, his face twisted in something between disbelief and humiliation. His entire performance this evening, the lectures, the condescension, the financial advice, was replaying in his mind. Every word he'd said about my lack of sophistication, my limited understanding, my inability to build real wealth. He'd spent 3 hours explaining my own investment strategy back to me like I'd never heard of it. "You let me," he said finally, and there was anger creeping into his voice now. Defensive anger. "You sat there and let me talk about portfolios and wealth management and you said nothing. You made me look like an idiot." "No," I said quietly. "You made yourself look like an idiot. I just gave you enough rope." "Marion," Doug said, his voice shaking slightly. My name came out like a question, like he was asking who I actually was. I turned to look at him. "My boyfriend of 2 years. The man I'd shared an apartment with, slept beside every night, built a life with. The man who'd whispered, "Don't make a scene," 20 minutes ago. "You have $1 million, he said, like he was testing the words. "You've had it the whole time we've been together. And you never told me. Would you have believed me?" I asked. "If I'd told you 2 years ago on our third date that I had a substantial investment portfolio, what would you have thought?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Because we both knew the answer. He would have thought I was exaggerating, delusional, or lying. "I've been living with you," he continued, his voice getting louder. "Splitting a 1-bedroom apartment. Watching you shop at Goodwill. Using coupons at the grocery store. And you're a millionaire?" "Yes," I said simply. "That's insane," he said. You've been lying to me for 2 years." "I never lied," I corrected. "You never asked, and you wouldn't have believed me anyway." Grace made a choking sound. When I looked at her, tears were sliding down her cheeks, ruining her carefully applied makeup. "I've been so stupid," she whispered. "Jeremiah told me, he said we were building wealth together. That he was teaching me about money. That we'd have everything we wanted." She looked at her fiancé with dawning horror. "But you don't even have half what Marion has. And she's been doing it by herself. While I've been bragging about your BMW and your watch and your clients." She pulled away. "Did you know?" she demanded. "When you were talking down to Marion all night, calling her financially illiterate, saying she'd never seen a real portfolio, did you have any idea?" "Of course I didn't know," he snapped. "How could I know? She dresses like she shops at a garage sale. She drives a car that's 10 years old. She works at a library making barely enough to survive. Every visible indicator suggested I was poor," I finished for him. "Because you measure worth by appearance. By watches and cars and job titles. You never once considered that someone might choose to live modestly while building actual wealth." My mother was crying now. Silent tears running down her face, dripping onto her pearl necklace. "I've been so wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "Marion, I've been so wrong about you. About everything." My father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all take a moment." "No," I said firmly. "No more moments. No more pretending. We're going to sit here and talk about this. Really talk about it. Because I'm done being invisible in my own family." Jeremiah stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound so harsh it made everyone flinch. "I don't have to sit here and be humiliated," he said, his voice tight with wounded pride. "Then leave," my mother said. Everyone turned to stare at her. "Get out of my house," she repeated, her voice stronger now. "You spent the entire evening insulting my daughter. Making her feel small. Lecturing her about things she clearly understands better than you do. So get out." Jeremiah's mouth opened in shock. "Mrs. Bridgers, Now," my father added, standing up. His voice carried the cold authority of someone used to closing deals. "Leave now." Jeremiah looked around the table one last time, searching for an ally, someone to defend him or at least question my evidence. He found nothing but shocked faces and averted eyes. Grace wouldn't look at him. She was staring at her engagement ring like it had transformed into something unrecognizable. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair with shaking hands. "This is ridiculous. Grace, we're leaving." "No," she said quietly, not looking up. "You're leaving." "I'm staying." "Grace." "Go, Jeremiah." He stood there for another moment, his face cycling through emotions, anger, humiliation, desperation. Then he walked to the front door. We heard it open, then close. Not a slam, just a final click that somehow felt more definitive than any amount of noise. The silence he left behind was different from before. Heavier. More complicated. I looked at Doug, who was still staring at me like I was a stranger. "I think I need some air," he said, pushing back his chair. He walked out to the back patio without waiting for a response. Through the window, I could see him standing at the railing, his hands gripping the wood, his shoulders tight. Processing. Trying to reconcile 2 years of his reality with this new information that changed everything. My mother lowered herself slowly back into her chair. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her, gripping each other so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Marion, I don't even know where to begin." "How about starting with why?" I said. My voice came out harder than I intended. "Why you spent my entire adult life treating me like a disappointment. Why you introduced me last, if you introduced me at all. Why you called me practical, like it was a diagnosis." She flinched. "I thought I was being realistic. I thought I was accepting you as you were." "You were accepting the version of me you decided I was," I corrected. "You never asked who I actually was. You just looked at my job title and my apartment and my clothes and decided you knew everything about my life." My father sat down heavily, suddenly looking much older than his 60 years. "You're right," he said. "You're absolutely right. I measured you by the wrong standards. By visible markers of success, salary, job prestige, material possessions. I never considered that you might be succeeding in ways I couldn't see." Grace finally looked up, her mascara smudged, her perfect facade completely destroyed. "I've been so horrible to you," she said, her voice thick with tears. "All those comments about your clothes, your apartment, your life. I thought I was being understanding. But I was just being condescending." "You were doing what they taught you to do," I said, gesturing to our parents. "Measure worth by appearance. Value people based on how impressive they look to others." "I've been dating men I didn't even like," Grace continued, the words tumbling out now. "Jeremiah included. I dated him because he had the right job, the right credentials, drove the right car. I thought that's what success looked like. What love was supposed to look like." She twisted the engagement ring on her finger. "He proposed after 5 months. I said yes because Mom and Dad were impressed. Because my friends would be jealous. Because it looked good on Instagram." She laughed bitterly. "I don't even love him. I'm not sure I ever did. I just loved what he represented." My mother made a small wounded sound. "And you," Grace said, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You've been building real wealth, real security, making smart decisions, living authentically. While I've been performing. Pretending. Going into credit card debt to maintain an image of success I don't actually have." "How much debt?" I asked gently. 17,000, she whispered. "Across 4 cards. The dress I'm wearing tonight cost $800. I can't afford it. I can't afford any of it. But I thought that's what I was supposed to do. That's what successful people look like." My father rubbed his face with both hands. "We did this," he said. "Greta and I. We taught you girls that appearance mattered more than substance. That impressing people was more important than being genuine. That your worth was measured by what you could show off to our friends. I just wanted you to be happy," my mother said, tears flowing freely now. "Both of you. I thought happiness came from status, from prestige, from having things other people envied. That's how I was raised. That's what my mother taught me." She looked at me directly for the first time in what felt like years. Really looked at me, not through me or past me, but at me. "But you found a different path," she said. "You built something real while we were busy building illusions. And instead of celebrating that, instead of being proud of your intelligence and discipline and independence, I dismissed you. I made you feel invisible in your own family." "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked. "Not to brag or prove anything, but just, why keep it secret?" I considered the question. The real answer was complicated. Years of being overlooked, of having my achievements dismissed, of learning that my voice didn't matter in this family. But there was a simpler truth underneath it all. "Because you never asked," I said. Not once in 10 years did any of you ask me about my financial goals, my investment strategy, my plans for the future. You decided I was struggling, that I needed help, that I'd settled for less than I deserved. You never considered that I was exactly where I wanted to be. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from someone I didn't recognize. Then another. Then several more in quick succession. I picked it up and my stomach dropped. "What is it?" Grace asked. "Emma," I said. "Your friend Emma. She was here earlier, wasn't she? When she stopped by to say hello to Mom?" My mother nodded. "She dropped off some charity gala tickets." "Why?" I turned my phone screen toward them. Emma had posted about the dinner on social media. Not a video, thankfully, but a detailed written account that read like a blow-by-blow sports commentary. "Just witnessed the most insane family dinner of my life," the post began. "The quiet sister who everyone thought was broke just casually revealed she's a millionaire and demolished her sister's arrogant fiancé in the process. This woman is my hero." The post had been shared 247 times in the 30 minutes since Jeremiah left. "Oh no," Grace breathed. My phone kept buzzing. Notifications piling up. Comments from people I'd never met. Shares from friends of friends. Screenshots being passed around. The story was going viral. And I had no idea what that was going to mean for any of us. 3 months later, and the world looked different. Or maybe I just looked at it differently now. I stood in the kitchen of my modest apartment, the same apartment I'd lived in for 4 years, making coffee on a Saturday morning. Through the window, I could see snow falling gently over the city, coating everything in fresh white. My phone sat on the counter, notifications silenced. The viral post had eventually died down, replaced by newer scandals and fresher content. But it had left ripples in its wake. Ripples that were still spreading through my life in unexpected ways. The media attention had been overwhelming at first. Local news wanted interviews. Financial bloggers reached out. Someone even asked if I'd write a book about my investment journey. I declined everything except one podcast interview about financial independence and living below your means. The host had been respectful, curious rather than sensational. That felt right. What surprised me more were the messages from strangers. Hundreds of them. People who'd felt invisible in their own families, who'd been underestimated their whole lives, who'd been building quiet success while everyone dismissed them. They thanked me for speaking up. For showing them it was possible to stop being small. One message in particular stuck with me. A woman named Sarah wrote, "I've been hiding my accounting business from my family for 3 years because they think I should have a real career. After seeing your story, I told them the truth. Thank you for giving me courage." I'd framed that message and put it on my desk at the library. A reminder that sometimes our stories matter more than we know. There was a knock at my door. Grace stood in the hallway, holding 2 paper bags from the bagel shop down the street. She'd started a tradition of Saturday morning breakfast 3 months ago, right after the dinner. Every single week, without fail. "I brought everything bagels," she said, stepping inside. "And that fancy cream cheese you like." She looked different now. Her hair was in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater from Target. I'd been with her when she bought it, marveling at how excited she'd gotten about finding something for $19.99. No designer labels. No performance. We settled at my small kitchen table, the same one I'd sat at late nights when I first started researching investments. Grace had paid off 2 of her 4 credit cards. Sold most of her designer clothes on consignment. Moved out of the trendy loft and into a modest apartment 3 blocks from mine. "How is she?" I asked Grace. "Better, I think. She talks about you differently now. With pride, but also regret. Real regret, not performative stuff. She asked if you'd come to dinner next Sunday." Sunday dinners had continued, but they were different. Smaller. Quieter. Real. My parents cooked now, actually cooked, not catered. The china stayed in the cabinet. We ate off regular dishes and talked about real things. My father asked me about my investment strategy and actually listened. My mother asked about books I was reading at the library, curious about my work instead of dismissive. It wasn't perfect. Years of dysfunction didn't disappear overnight. There were still awkward moments, old patterns trying to reassert themselves. But they were trying. We all were. "I'll be there," I told Grace. "Doug won't be, though, will he?" she asked gently. I shook my head. No. Doug won't be there. We'd broken up 6 weeks ago. He tried to adjust to the new reality, tried to reconcile the woman he thought he'd been dating with who I actually was. But some gaps are too wide to bridge. "I can't get past it," he'd said one night, sitting on this same couch. "Not the money. But that you didn't trust me enough to tell me. That you thought I'd judge you or not believe you. Would you have believed me?" I'd asked. He couldn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. Some relationships survive revelation. Others don't. Ours didn't. "I'm sorry," Grace said now, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "I'm not," I said honestly. Better to know now than waste more years with someone who needed me to be small. After Grace left, I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and opened my laptop. My portfolio had continued growing steadily over the past 3 months. The acquisition of a healthcare company I'd researched had paid off beautifully. A tech position I'd held for 4 years had split 2 for 1. My dividend payments had increased by 7% across my holdings. Total portfolio value as of this morning, $1,398,234.67. I stared at that number for a long moment. Not with pride, exactly, but with something quieter. Satisfaction, maybe. Or simply acknowledgement of what persistence and patience could build when no one was watching. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Your father and I would like to talk with you before Sunday dinner. Just the 3 of us. Would you come early? 4 p.m.? I hesitated, then typed back, "I'll be there." Sunday arrived cold and clear. I drove to my parents' house in my Honda, the same Honda I'd had for years, though I could easily afford to replace it. But it ran perfectly. Why fix what wasn't broken? My parents were waiting in the living room when I arrived. No elaborate staging this time. Just 2 people sitting on their couch, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen before. "Thank you for coming early," my mother said. She was holding a box. Simple cardboard, about the size of a shoebox. "We've been going through old things," my father said. "Part of the therapy process. Examining our patterns, our behaviors, where they came from." My mother opened the box and pulled out a stack of photographs. She handed them to me, her hands shaking slightly. They were pictures of me. Hundreds of them. Baby photos, school pictures, birthday parties, graduations. All the moments I thought had been forgotten, overlooked in favor of Grace's professionally shot portraits. "They were never in the attic," my mother said, her voice thick. "I kept them separate. In our bedroom. Because every time I looked at them, I felt guilty." "Guilty?" I repeated. "You were such an independent child," she continued. "So self-sufficient. You never demanded attention like Grace did. You just existed contentedly. Did your homework without being asked. Made your own lunches. Found your own entertainment. And I mistook that independence for not needing me. For not needing anyone." She wiped at her eyes. So I poured all my attention into Grace, who cried for it, who performed for it, who seemed to need constant validation. "And you? I let you become invisible because it was easier. Because you didn't make demands." My father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been discussing our estate planning," he said in his business voice, though his eyes were wet. "We want you to know that we're dividing everything equally between you and Grace. Not because we're trying to make up for the past, money can't fix what we did. But because you deserve to know that you matter equally. I don't need your money, I said quietly. I never did. We know, my mother said. That's not the point. The point is that we see you now. Really see you. And we're so incredibly sorry it took 32 years and a public humiliation for us to finally look. I felt tears prick my eyes. I don't need apologies written in estate planning documents either. I need you to show up. Keep showing up. Keep trying to do better. We will, my father promised. Every day. For as long as it takes. When Grace arrived an hour later, the dinner was nothing like those painful Sunday gatherings I'd endured for years. We ate pot roast my father had cooked, still slightly overdone, but made with genuine effort. We talked about real things. My mother asked about a book recommendation. My father wanted to know my thoughts on a stock he was considering. No one introduced me as our practical daughter. No one dismissed my life or my choices. I wasn't invisible anymore. After dinner, as I was getting ready to leave, Grace walked me to my car. You know what the weirdest part of all this is, she said, her breath visible in the cold air. I spent my whole life trying to be the impressive one. The one everyone noticed. The one people envied. And I was miserable. She looked at me in the darkness, streetlights casting shadows across her face. But you? You spent 10 years being overlooked, dismissed, treated like you didn't matter. And you built something real anyway. Not for them. Not for approval or validation. Just for yourself. Yeah, I said simply. That's actual strength, she said. That's what I want. Not to look successful. To actually be successful. On my own terms. I hugged her goodbye and drove home through the quiet streets, past houses lit up with evening lives. I thought about that dinner 3 months ago. About Jeremiah's condescension and Doug's betrayal and my family's shock. About the moment I'd finally stopped being small. For 33 years, I'd been the quiet one. The overlooked daughter. The sister who didn't quite measure up. The woman people assumed they understood because they'd seen her thrift store clothes and modest apartment and decided that was the whole story. But quiet was never weakness. Invisible didn't mean worthless. And staying small to protect other people's comfort was just another way of lying about who you were. I'd built wealth while they built illusions. I'd found freedom while they performed for approval. I'd succeeded by metrics that actually mattered, security, independence, authenticity, while they chased success that looked good in photographs but felt hollow in practice. The truth was the most powerful thing I'd ever wielded. Not because it destroyed anyone, but because it freed everyone. My parents from their shallow values. Grace from her exhausting performance. Even Doug from a relationship built on incomplete information. And me? I was finally, completely, unapologetically free. I pulled into my apartment parking lot and sat in my car for a moment, engine running, heat pouring through the vents. My phone showed new messages. More strangers sharing their stories. More people finding courage to speak their truth. I thought about responding, about telling them what I'd learned. But the message was simple enough. Your worth isn't measured by other people's standards. Your success doesn't need to look like anyone else's. Your voice matters, even if, especially if, you've spent years being told to stay quiet. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth and let everyone else deal with their own discomfort. I turned off the car and headed inside, ready for whatever came next. Finally visible. Finally seen. Finally, truly myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.